Towards the end of the war, the South was becoming weaker and weaker. The North's advanced technology and tactics proved to be too much for the South to endure, and in 1865 the South surrendered. The Union was now in total control over the nation, and the process of Reconstruction was underway.
Before the war had ended, the Union had established the Freedmen's Bureau, a government agency that would give aid to the recently freed blacks. Now that the North was in control, laws and amendments would be put into place to bring the Emancipation Proclamation to fruition as a law. Soon after the war, Lincoln's 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery in all territories, was finally passed by Congress on December 6, 1865. Unfortunately, Lincoln was assassinated 4 days after the war and never got to see his proposal come into law. Lincoln's vice president, Andrew Johnson, became president on April 15, 1865, but would later be impeached in 1869 because of his numerous conflicts with the Republican-dominated Congress. Soon after, the 13th Amendment was established. Southern states formed laws which are formally known as the Black Codes. These laws restricted the freedoms of African Americans, but Southern efforts to hinder and stop blacks from becoming free would not hold to be enough to stop blacks from gaining freedom. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 was formed by Congress, granting black citizenship, and after 2 years, the act was set in stone in the Constitution and formally known as the 14th Amendment.
During and immediately after the Civil War, many Northerners headed to the Southern states, driven by hopes of economic gain and a desire to work on behalf of the newly emancipated slaves, or a combination of both. These carpetbaggers, whom many in the South viewed as opportunists looking to exploit and profit from the region's misfortunes, supported the Republican Party and would play a central role in shaping new Southern governments during Reconstruction. In addition to carpetbaggers and freed African Americans, the majority of Republican support in the South came from white Southerners who supported the policies of Reconstruction rather than opposed them. These Southerners were referred to as scalawags. By the early 1870s, the system known as sharecropping had come to dominate agriculture across the cotton planting South. Under this system, ex-slaves and poor whites would rent out small plots of land, known as shares, from the rich land-owning whites. In return, they would give a portion of their crop to the landowner at the end of the year. This practice sounded good in theory, but in actuality, the sharecroppers rarely had the tools and land to provide enough for the owner, and they ended up barely providing enough for themselves. There was still a great amount of prejudice against the blacks in the South during this time. The KKK, a secret organization formed by an old Confederate general named Nathan Bedford Forrest, was formed to intimidate blacks and employed violence as a means of pushing back Reconstruction. The South was so angered by what was going on that multiple riots occurred. In 1866, in Memphis, Tennessee, a race riot broke out, and the Memphis police, as well as some other white civilians, killed 46 African Americans and destroyed 90 houses, schools, and 4 churches. 2 months later, down in New Orleans, another race riot broke out. New Orleans police killed more than 40 black and white Republicans and wounded more than 150. Despite the mass violence and conflict, the Reconstruction process continued. In 1867, Congress divided the Southern states into 5 military districts and forced the Southern states to allow blacks to vote. These acts were held for another 3 years and be formally known as the Reconstruction Acts. It was not until 3 years later that this act would pass as the 15th Amendment, granting blacks the constitutional right to vote. It would later become amended so that all men, regardless of race, would have the constitutional right to vote. A year later, in 1876, one of the most contentious and controversial presidential elections would take place. Rutherford Hayes, a Republican from Ohio, was running against Samuel Tilden, a Democrat from New York. Tilden won 184 electoral votes to Hayes' 165, with 20 votes being unresolved. These 20 votes were being disputed in the states of Florida, Louisiana, South Carolina, and Oregon. An informal deal was struck to resolve the dispute over these votes. The deal, known as the Compromise of 1877, awarded all 20 electoral votes to Hayes, which gave him the election. In return, the Republicans agreed to withdraw all federal troops from the South to end the Reconstruction era. Southern states would go on to pursue a political economy resembling that of its pre-war condition. The Reconstruction era was filled with significant historical events and actions. African Americans were granted full U.S. citizenship, allowed to vote, and use public accommodations as they wish. But despite all of this, racism was still running rampant, and African Americans were still poorly treated and oppressed by some, as this would be the case indefinitely. but as a whole, the Reconstruction era was a major success for the advancement of equality in the United States.